today. I'm zooming in from the village of Huichin on occupied Lishan Ohlone land, also called the San Francisco East Bay. I come from Yaqui, undocumented Choctaw, Cherokee, and European ancestors. I'm a grandmother and I've been a defender and protector of the sacred system of life for over 40 years. I want to thank all of the speakers, Casey Camp-Horanek, Joy Braun, Karina Gold, Tom Littlebear, and Crystal Two Bulls. Sorry, Crystal. What a powerhouse of speakers that we have today. I want to thank them for joining us in this powerful webinar. And we also thank our co-sponsors, Segura Te Land Trust and the Indigenous Environmental Network. We encourage participants to introduce themselves to each other in the chat, including whose territory you live on. And Shannon is going to put a website up in the chat if you don't know whose territory you're on as a guest, and you can look to Shannon for an example of how to do that in the chat. In the last few years, there's been two, actually many, but we're talking about two Indigenous-led movements that have been boldly leading the way forward for the protection of Mother Earth, Indigenous rights, and climate justice by reclaiming sovereignty rooted in ancestral knowledge, including the rights of nature and the LandBack movement. During this webinar, we'll hear from some of those leading the way in those movements and hopefully explore the potential for collaboration and/or connection between them. We're going to start with my good friend and mentor, Casey Camp-Horanek, who will lead us in an opening prayer. And I'll do a fuller introduction right now. Casey is from the Southern Ponca tribe in what is now called Oklahoma. She's the drum keeper of the Ponca Patata Women's Society. In addition to being the founding chairwoman of Movement Rights Board, she also directs our Ponca Rights of Nature campaign. While serving on the Ponca Business Committee, Casey led her community to become the first tribe to recognize the rights of nature in tribal law in the United States. And she's currently the Ponca Environmental Ambassador. Like her brother, the late Carter Camp, who was a leader in the American Indian movement, Casey has been an outspoken protector and defender of her people and Mother Earth. As a result of fracking and the ConocoPhillips refinery, she and her community live in one of the worst fossil fuel impacted areas of the United States. She's also an actress and continues to work on film projects, in addition to speaking on concerns of Indigenous communities globally. She serves as the chair of the Indigenous Council for the Global Alliance for the Rights of Nature. And thank you so much, Casey, for leading us in this prayer.
It's an honor to be here among all of you and all of you who are participating from wherever you are. I would appreciate it if you would allow me a moment to talk to Wakanda Khobe, the great mystery, on our behalf. And please, in your own way, make those connections through the way that you've been taught and how your heart and spirit responds the best. For my daughter Joy, for those that are here, Penny and Shannon, Karina, Tom, and Crystal, it's such an honor to be among you and to have this time, this little bit of time in the universal way to be able to share. And if you will take me into your hearts for a moment and give me the strength to speak on all of our behalfs just a little bit. As an elder, I'm honored to do so. And as a child of the universe, I feel small taking this responsibility at the same time. And I appreciate your help and your guidance. Want to ask this sacred water to bear witness so that what I say reflects what I feel and reflects the truth of how the Spirit has brought us together on this day. Wakanda Khobe, Majan Khobe, Ni Khobe, Mi Khobe, Miamba Khobe, Khida Khobe. Te, Uhu, Manchu, Judy, Abadi, Pankawau, Wibdaha, Ehe. Great Spirit, Earth Mother, Father, Son, Grandmother Moon, spirits of the winds, the buffalo, the sacred water, those that live within her, those with wings, the sacred eagle, those that burrow. On this day, you saw fit to bring us together. You have given us this little sliver of a moment to share and to bring forth some way that our ancestors have given to us to honor those things that are life and to find a way forward for our children and grandchildren and all the way down through the generations to come. Spirit Nation, join our voices with our thoughts, with our intentions, with our own spirit, with the guidance of the ancestors. We ask for your help on this day. We ask you to look at all the living things in, around, and through our Mother, the Earth, our Father, the sky, the sacred star nation, and so many other things that we don't know. We look to the west, to the Thunder Nation, to the north, to the White Wolf, to the east, to the Morning Star, to the south, to the warm winds that are coming. Above us, all that is sacred. Below us, all that is sacred. As we come into the center of this thing they call a webinar, that is nothing more than the web of life rewoven to reflect this moment that we're in. We ask you to continue to guide us. If there's a way that we stepped wrong, put our feet back on the path. If there's something that we have forgotten, those in mourning, those in the hospitals, those that are sickly, those that are hungry, those without a roof over their head, those without love, and those that might consider themselves our enemy. We ask a special place in our heart for each and every one of them, a special blessing that only you know how to give. And you, sacred water, I just want to tell you, I love you. I love you. I thank you. If there's any way that you need us to go forward, we're here, we're ready, we're together as one. Sham.
Hi.
I got it. I'm sorry,
That's
Shannon.
okay.
Thank you, Casey. As always, your prayer moves me to tears once again. So just to let you know a little bit about how today's going to go, each speaker has 8 to 10 minutes for opening comments. After that, we'll hear a chime signaling that the speaker is over time. We could hear at least an hour from each presenter, but we know that you're all keen to ask questions and we want to leave 25 minutes to answer them. Our first speaker is Karina Gold, and I live on Karina, I'm a guest on Karina's territory. She's the chair and spokesperson for the Confederated Villages of Lishan Ohlone. Karina was born and raised in Oakland, California in the village of Huichin. She's a mother of 3 and grandmother of 4, and the co-founder and lead organizer for Indian People Organizing for Change, a small Native-run organization that works on Indigenous people issues and sponsored the annual Shell Mound Peace Walks from 2005 to 2009. These walks brought about education and awareness for the desecration of sacred sites in the Greater Bay Area. As a tribal leader, she has continued to fight for the protection of the shell mounds, uphold her nation's inherent right to sovereignty, stand in solidarity with her Indigenous relatives to protect our sacred waters, mountains, and lands all over the world. Her life's work has led to the creation of Sogorea Land Trust, a woman-led organization within the urban setting of her ancestral territory of the Bay Area. Sogorea Land Trust works to return Indigenous land to Indigenous peoples. Based on an understanding that Oakland is home to many peoples that have been oppressed and marginalized, Sogorea works to create a thriving community that lives in relation to the land. Through the practices of rematriation, cultural revitalization, and land restoration, the Land Trust calls on Native and non-Native peoples to heal and transform legacies of colonization, genocide, and to do the work our ancestors and future generations are calling us to do. Karina, please share your experience and leadership work protecting sacred sites for the Ohlone and other peoples, the Shumi Land Tax, and the Sogorea Land Trust. And if possible, we invite you to help connect the dots between the rights of nature and the work you do. Thank you, Karina.
Karina. Hello, relatives. So good to be here with all of you today. Thank you, Penny and Movement Rights, Shannon, for inviting us all to be a part of this conversation. I'm going to try to speed talk and get through this so everybody else has a chance. It's always wonderful to be able to talk about our own traditional territory and the lands that we live on. I was blessed to be born into this world as a Lashawn woman at this time where we need to make great changes and bring back a balance in the world. And that's really what Sogorea Land Trust work is about, and the work of protecting and preserving the sacred sites. It's about bringing back the relationships to the lands. And in our lands have been urbanized in a very short time. California has only been colonized for the last a little over 200 years. So everything that you can imagine in the Bay Area has been here for a very short amount of time. And in that time that people have come to our lands, they have done what they have done in all Indigenous places. There has been a correlation between the raping of the lands and the raping of women, the destruction of our sacred place, and the destruction of the sacredness of women's bodies and women's spirits. And so rematriation is about bringing that balance back to the lands and to the women and to the people, so that we remember our original teachings and how to be on this land again. Our earth is telling us right now that she is tired of holding on to us in the way that we have been. And so it's time for us to come back into balance and to remember our sacred responsibilities and to come back into that circle of creation. We have been away from that circle of creation for too long. So the Sogorea Land Trust actually was created not because we wanted to create a land trust, but because our people are homeless in our own homelands. We are not a federally recognized tribe. And our prayer for many years had been to bring our ancestral remains back from the institutions in the Bay Area, a place that holds thousands and thousands of our ancestral remains. And as we were praying, doing these walks around the Bay Area and talking about reintroducing ourselves almost to our ancestors, stopping at these sacred sites where our ancestral shell mounds had been destroyed by development, our prayer was to bring them home, and realizing that there was no home to bring them to, realizing that because we are a non-federally recognized tribe, we had no land base to bring them home to. So what do? We decided to use the land trust as a tool in order for us to do that work, in order for us to bring about that. The Land Trust really started because of that sacred work of protecting and preserving sacred sites. You see, in 20 years ago, a little over 20 years ago, when we started Indian People Organizing for Change, most people thought that all Ohlone were dead. We were taught about in the past, and that we didn't exist anymore. There may have been signs about Ohlone people or businesses with our names on it, but they were created without us and not about us. And so it was really about bringing that vibration back by doing those walks and praying at those sacred sites. And these sacred sites are not sacred sites that you might intentionally think about. They're parking lots and railroad tracks and bars and schools and streets. And these are our sacred sites are underneath these places. There's one place, the oldest of all of those places, of the 425 shell mounds that used to ring the Bay Area, this older place called the West Berkeley Shell Mound, we have been fighting to preserve and protect for the last 5 years. It's been a landmark in the city of Berkeley for 20 years, but because of private land ownership, these people can own our sacred sites in these urban areas. And they can decide that they might want to destroy it by creating condominiums and shopping on it. Well, this land has been pretty much untouched for almost 200 years. They took the top of our shell mound off. They paved it with a parking lot. But imagine that this land has really been left open. And so for us, we know that this land is important because for some reason our ancestors decided to allow it to stay this place. You see, this place is a part of our cosmologies. It's a part of who we are. It's the first village site and ceremonial site that our ancestors placed along the bay. It lines with what we call Alcatraz Island. And Alcatraz Island was not a land that we ever went to as Ohlone people. We were fishermen along the shores. We had tule boats, but our ancestors went and sat on that island as they waited to be brought across at the end of their time here. Their spirits would sit there for 4 days while we had ceremony on the shores. And on the evening of the 4th day, as the sun's going down, their spirits would leave us and go through the Western Gate, which many people now know as the Golden Gate Bridge. And so this part of our cosmology is a place that we have prayed forever. As Indigenous people, we know that our spirituality is place-based. It's not like we can move to another church or we can take our spirituality somewhere else. We have to be in these places to sing the songs, to do the ceremonies and do that. We have been blessed in the Bay Area that we have had people from all walks of life come to that sacred site, that 2 acres of land that's still open, and to pray there with us. We have connected our sacred site to the sacred sites of those that are fighting on Mauna Kea to save their sacred mountain, to our sisters, the Winnemem-Wintu, that are saving the salmon up our Carquinez Strait and into their rivers, to stand in solidarity with our folks that are in the Pacific and in West Papua who are facing genocide right now, to stand with our sisters and brothers that are in the Amazon that are standing for the forests. So this sacred site actually connects us to all of these places. Our relatives from Oak Flats came and they stood with us and danced and prayed with us on that land. People that are Mexica dancers and Korean drummers and folks that are Tibetan and Buddhist and Jewish and Christian have all stood and prayed at this sacred site with us and protected with us. We've been in court with them for the last few years, and we won the first court case to protect that site, and then it was appealed. And while we were in appeals court 2 weeks ago, the owners of the land put up a 6-foot fence with barbed wire around it. And we have put out, asked our community members to come out and put ribbons and prayers and artwork on the fences. And the developers have paid someone to come out every day and take it down. And so, this is something that we continue to go on. We talk about sometimes colonization happening a long time ago. Colonization continues to happen to Indigenous peoples on our lands every single day. And so Sogorea Te' Land Trust is separate from Indian People Organizing for Change. Indian People Organizing for Change continues to be a grassroots organization that does the work of protecting the sacred, and does that work in coalition and with the tribe, the Confederated Villages of Lashawn. Segorite was created so you can get land back into Indigenous hands. And we received our first piece of land in 200 years, a quarter acre of land in a very poor neighborhood in Oakland on Planting Justice property. And Planting Justice is a beautiful organic nursery that employs formerly incarcerated men and women. And we received that land after Standing Rock, because those that were leaders at Planting Justice went to Standing Rock and were so moved by it, asked the elders what they should do. And the elders told them they should work with the First Nation peoples on whose land they're on. And the return of the land came to us. The first piece of land returned to us in 250 years, where we have actually been able to create our first dance arbor in 250 years there, a place that is sovereign land for Indigenous people on our territory. You imagine in one county, Alameda County, that's one of 5 counties that our tribe has traditional ties to. Alameda County has 425,000 acres. The Ohlone people own maybe a quarter to a half an acre. And that includes my house and my auntie's house. And so we really are invisible and homeless in our own homelands. And so the work that we do in protecting and preserving our sacred sites is really a work of love, not just love for our own people, but love for the people that have come to stay on our lands. We ask people to come here and to be good guests. We cannot be good hosts unless we have good guests on our land. And you ask any child what it means to be a good guest, and they will tell you what all of us have taught our children and our grandchildren and our nieces and nephews. You don't touch things that aren't yours. You ask permission. You don't break things. You say thank you and please. But when we become adults, we forget that very teaching that we gave our children. We forget that we are the guests on someone else's homeland. How do we work in reciprocity to bring our waterways back, to make sure that everything has a rightful place in our lands, that we have respect for all living creatures? And Segorite Land Trust, Indian People Organizing for Change, Confederated Villages of Lashawn are all in alignment to doing that by bringing back the balance into the world, by making sure that Indigenous leadership of women is heard and followed, that we are the ones that have the songs for our children's children. We're the ones that have the songs for the waters and for our basket making materials and medicines. We're the ones that help to bring life into this earth. And we are the ones that actually have the job of helping to usher it out. And so those relationships that we have in this world has to be brought back into balance. When we are able as mothers and grandmothers and aunties to do that kind of work here, our sisters, then we will be able to also ensure that the Indigenous men have their rightful place and they remember what that place was before colonization. That we can get away from misogyny and we can get away from the patriarchy that has harmed this earth, and that we can move forward in a better way.
Thank you, Karina. Such powerful work that you're doing. Thank you so much. So there's information in the chat if you want to learn more about the Segorite Land Trust. And our next speaker is Crystal Tubles, Director of the LandBack campaign. Crystal is Oglala Lakota in Northern Cheyenne from Lame Deer, Montana. She has extensive experience as an organizer and is on the front lines with campaign development and management on local, national, and transnational campaigns for social, racial, and environmental justice. Crystal's identity as a Native American veteran is central to her organizing and storytelling. At the heart of Crystal's work are the connections between collective wellness, environmental justice, Indigenous people's rights, and anti-militarism. In healing from her experience as a soldier, Crystal has dedicated herself to embodying what she views as the essential quality of a warrior, a commitment to the well-being of not only her people and their relationship to the land, but that of all peoples. Crystal, thank you so much for joining us, and please share your experience and campaign work on the LandBack movement and where you see the movement going. Thank you.
A Peveshev, everyone. Mene Wosta Nanehav. My name's Crystal Tubles, as Penny shared. And I first want to just say what an honor it is to be here today amongst these powerful matriarchs and Tom, our brother, and just it's really humbling and also just really, it feels really good, like family to be here. And so just really thankful to be in this, on this panel today. But I just want to start out by sharing, a little bit of what LandBack means to me and what it has meant, to Indian Collective and to the work that we've been doing with our campaign. Because I think that's the number one question that most folks ask me is, what does LandBack mean to you? And I invite folks too, as I'm sharing, to put into the chat what LandBack means to you, because we all embody this work in different ways and move about this in different ways, and just want to acknowledge that. But for me, LandBack is the literal reclamation of land. And deeper than that, it's the reclamation of the relationship to the land and our caretaking responsibilities in those original instructions that were put in us through our ceremonies and through our teachings and our language and our culture of how to be in relationship to the land. And it's the reclamation of everything that was stolen from us when we were forcefully removed from these lands, right? So it's the reclamation of language and ceremony and the harvesting of medicines in our culture, the hunting and the knowledge of our animal relatives. It's our structures, our kinship structures, our food structures, our education structures, healthcare, housing, even governing are all land-based and in relationship to the land. And so for me, that's what LandBack is. And it's a massive undertaking of not only just reclaiming the physical lands for us to be in relationship to, but the relationships to all of those other structures that we have. And that's what our campaign's about. And so as far as, LandBack is like this meta narrative, right? I always compare it to like Black Lives Matter in terms of there's organizers and organizations and grassroots folks and elders and young people all pushing forward LandBack and all doing that work on behalf in these many different ways. And there's no ownership in that. And so what we did with the Indian Collective is we really just wanted to step into that work and to support the movement of LandBack and also, revive our fight for the Black Hills. And so on July 3rd, after we had seen the momentum being built by our Black brothers and sisters and relatives around George Floyd's murder, there was this momentum around the conversation of tearing down colonial statues and calling out white supremacy in the very system and the foundation that this nation was built on, which is white supremacy. And so we basically moved with that momentum. And on July 3rd, took a stand and called out Trump for trespassing on our sacred lands and our territories. And, we held off Trump and supporters for, I think it was around 5 hours, and were arrested. 20 of us were arrested there that day. And our president and CEO still faces up to 16 years of prison for that day. And we're still fighting the misdemeanors and the charges, but we're organizing around that. But what it did was it revived a fight. We had elders come up to us and tell us that they had given up on the idea of reclaiming the Black Hills and getting the Black Hills returned to us. And they said that action that day really, it brought hope back. And so what we did is we sat with that and we prayed, right? And we took that in and we launched our campaign. And we said that we're going to revive this fight. And support that. And so we did. And so our first part of our campaign is to shut down Mount Rushmore, the ultimate shrine of white supremacy that was built in the heart of our sacred lands and our territories. And the second part of that is reclaiming all public lands in the Black Hills. And so I know when people say land back, there's a lot of fear amongst our white allies and relatives around, we're not coming for people's houses or people's private lands. You know, we're coming for the public lands that exist there. And so to really name that, and that's a step, right? There's many steps that are going to be coming, but that's a first step. And so that's what we're moving on, is really pushing for a campaign around that. And you know, right now we're currently working on Storm Mountain. It's a retreat center in the heart of the Black Hills, and it was claimed by the United Methodist Church. And so we're building relationships to reclaim these spaces for us to reclaim relationship. The second part of our campaign is around really movement support and recognizing that our struggles, and I heard Karina speak to this, of how important it is for us to be in relationship with each other, and for us to not only be in relationship with each other across Indigenous spaces, but across all movement spaces, because we don't win without each other, right? Like, we have to have each other, and these are global issues. And so we have to be able to build those relationships. So part of the campaign is really building out that relationship across movement spaces and amongst Indigenous folks that are organizing around reclaiming land. And we do that in several ways. You know, we're able to monetarily support folks with resources. We're able to provide toolkits to folks who want to work and organize around public lands, private lands, tribal lands, and even individuals that want to reclaim lands. And, you know, that does include land trusts. So I have a lot of respect for the work that Karina has done, and look to that as a model of how we move forward. And also, just to name that, we're supporting them around the reclamation of public lands all across Turtle Island. That's 500 million acres of public lands that our people have rights to. We have every right to be in relationship with those lands. And now with Deb Haaland being confirmed as the Secretary of Interior, that's not aspirational anymore. That is a reality. We can do this. And we're here to support that and to organize around that. And we have 4 demands. Our demands are to dismantle white supremacy in the institutions that continue to uphold and embody white supremacy. We're demanding to defund white supremacy and the mechanisms that enforce white supremacy. And that's the military, that's police, that's ICE, Border Patrol, even park rangers. All of those are enforcing mechanisms that uphold white supremacy and keep Indigenous peoples and people of color from being in relationship to the land. And so we're also saying consent, really moving us to an era of consent and not meaningful consultation, and not living in an era where municipalities and cities and organizations can give consultation on our behalf, but rather where we as Indigenous peoples that are in relationship with this land, we say what happens. We give consent, yes or no. And that goes back to we giving women, like rematriating women, giving consent about our bodies. It's the same about giving consent around Mother Earth. And so really pushing for that era of consent and transitioning us from meaningful consultation to that. And so those are the 4 demands that we're organizing around and connecting movement spaces around, and hopefully connecting Indigenous struggles around as well. And just to add a little bit on to working across movement spaces, you know, we operate from the analysis that we know this nation was built on stolen land, and it was built by stolen people. And so for us, the continued invisibility of Indigenous peoples and the continued perpetuation of anti-Blackness are 2 pillars that uphold white supremacy. And so if we are really going to like fight for racial equity and climate change and justice, then we have to go back to the roots of what this nation was built on, and that is white supremacy. And that was the colonization and the removal of Indigenous peoples from this land. And so for every social justice and environmental justice movement on these lands now, they need to start to embody and carry forward the narrative of LandBack, because that is the roots. And as we know with our work and as Indigenous peoples, is that when Indigenous peoples are stewarding our lands and in relationship with our lands, all people benefit. It is on behalf of all peoples. everyone benefits from that. And so we really carry that and deepen our relationships. And as far as, just thinking about next steps and what we can all do, in addition to deepening our relationships, is really look for LandBack struggles happening around you. There are LandBack struggles happening all across Turtle Island and beyond these fake colonial borders. I mean, Karina named a few of them, like Oak Flat, the Chumash people, Tolowa, on the East Coast, fighting for recognition, fighting for having just small pieces of land to be in relationship to. 1492 LandBack Way, our Hawaiian relatives, our Kanaka relatives there, Puerto Rico, Guam, our Black relatives that are farming and building relationship to the land and the soil, the border wall, and all of our nations down there that have been fighting to just stay in relationship with the land and each other on the other side. And so I encourage folks to just continue to look for those struggles around you, because I promise they're there, and that we've been fighting and being in resistance and building the world that we want to see. And so I encourage folks to find those spaces and to also champion LandBack, carry that narrative forward in everything that we do. So that way, years down the road, when we submit LandBack legislation, that folks know what's coming, and that there's not fear attached to that, and that they know that this is what Indigenous folks are moving on, and this is what we're demanding and not asking for anymore. But just want to, again, say how thankful I am to be here in this space with my powerful panelists, and just really humbled and grateful to share this time with y'all. But thank you again.
Thank you so much, Crystal. Really learning a lot from all the speakers. Our next speaker is Tom Little Bear Nason. He's the tribal chairman of the Esselen tribe of Monterey County. The tribe has recently received 1,200 acres of sacred lands located in their Aboriginal homelands of Big Sur in Monterey County. The land is crucial to the tribe because the tribe has been landless for over 250 years since the colonization of Spanish missionaries, who ripped all of the Esselen tribal members from their ancient homelands and villages in 1770s, leaving the tribe without a place to call their own. The land holds a sacred mountain called Pico Blanco. This is the center of the Esselen's universe and holds the creation story for the tribe. Coyote, hummingbird, and eagle created the Esselen world as they have known it for countless generations. Little Bear is an elder and has been a land and water protector since he was chosen at the age of 8 to become the leader and to carry on the tribe's long tradition of protecting sacred lands of the American Indians, Native Americans. Little Bear did dozens of governmental projects to dam up rivers and to level off mountaintops for telescopes and towers. Most recently, the tribe, under his leadership, worked to remove the largest dam in California state history on the Carmel River in Monterey County. This has been a monumental task that has spawned numerous other dam removal projects on tribal lands in California, Oregon, and Washington states. He is currently working on further protections of sacred lands, forests, wildlife, and rivers within their tribal territory, and defending Mother Earth. Tom, please share your tribal victory and what it means for the Esselen tribe, for future generations, and for the protection of Mother Earth. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Very honored to be here amongst these beautiful women as elders. It's a very great honor to be able to be here today to speak on behalf of our tribe, our people, our ancestors, the ones that walked before us for thousands of years and countless generations on Mother Earth. Here on our ancestral lands in Big Sur, California, we have been in a struggle. We have been working for so many decades to try to regain our territory. We were the first tribe in California to become culturally extinct, according to Kroeber and different anthropologists who came through this land. But little did he know that my ancestors, my elders, they were wise enough to hide behind the rock. Our country is steep and mountainous, so they were able to go back and live in caves and hide from the white man who came to get them. We were very oppressed. Our people died very rapidly when they were taken to the missions. So by a single thread, we were able to hang on to little bits and fragments of our culture and our land. And much like my sister Karina says, that she was never removed from her land, still living on her land. That is the same for us as far as Aboriginal territory. The land, we don't consider ourselves owners of the land. I don't think any of Indigenous peoples consider themselves owners of anything other than their own rights, their own feelings to be part of the land. I always have been told that we are keepers of the allodial title. The allodial title to the land means that it's a sacred, undivided trust in the land, that we will share that land together as tribes, as two-leggeds, as four-leggeds, with the winged ones, the ones that swim, the ones that fly, the ones that crawl on the ground. That is important. Yes, we've had a great victory. We're one of the first tribes in California, federally unrecognized tribes under the mission system. We were able to secure this magic piece of land, which is actually the center of our universe, as spoken by our councilwoman here. Our land of Pico Blanco is the tallest mountain along the coastal range of California. And it rises up, and Pico Blanco means white mountain in Spanish. To us, it is called Pichi. It's a very sacred mountain to us. It's also the richest deposit of limestone on this mountain. And we only own half of we only are stewards of half of the mountain. The other one is owned by Granite Rock Company, who wants to mine it and take the limestone and make concrete to make more buildings to develop the land. For us, receiving this land is a great mark of history. For the first time in 250 years, a coastal tribe has gotten back a major piece of land. And we have been able to, through this land repatriation, we have a place now to repatriate our ancestors, because progress has sped up so much in the communities around us, from the Bay Area down through our area and Carmel and Monterey, that almost on a daily basis, our tribe is doing tribal consultation and doing monitoring and having the ability to remove our ancestors from these desecrated graves and take them back home to a land that we know forever in perpetuity will never be disturbed again. That means so much to us. It brings us to tears. It brings our ancestors much joy. The ancestors celebrating and dancing in the spirit world above us and are so honored. We've been grateful enough to receive this land, and we also made a commitment to our relatives of other tribes, the 5 tribes around us, the Rumsen, the Ohlone people, to have and the Salinan people who also need a place. This land gives us the ability to be able to go to a place without being interrupted, to have ceremonies that are deep, a place to be able to rebuild our sacred roundhouses, our dance harbors, our bear lodge, for our acorn ceremonies, our spring ceremonies, our deer dances, our bear dances in the fall. It's such a great honor. We have made a pledge of this land that we will sit with the piece of land, with Mother Earth, the sacred place on the earth. We were going to sit with it, and we're going to research and just ask for permission to do anything before we do a single thing. We were able to gain this land back through a variety of ways, which is pretty unique. The way we were able to get it back is through the governor of California's healing and reconciliation process. We were able to work with them under a grant and under a bill that came up for climate change and for cultural and for wilderness. And we were able to apply for a grant through the Natural Resource Agency of California. And it was a very long process and very challenging. I think there were over 400 applicants of other tribes, working to get land. And we were selected to the top 10, then the top 3. And then we were selected from that point to be able to receive $4.5 million to purchase the property, which is a huge, we could never raise that money ever ourselves in this modern era. Even today, as Indigenous people, we're still suppressed. We're still financially suppressed. So it's been a great responsibility for us to receive such a big gift. I do want to take time to thank other land trusts. We associated with the Western River Conservancy, which is a very fantastic nonprofit group out of Portland, Oregon, and out of San Francisco, who are trying to preserve as much riparian and rivers throughout the Western United States. And I think they've they preserved roughly around 400, 500,000 acres of land. They were great help. The Big Sur Land Trust, which is a local land trust in our area, that has preserved over 55,000 acres of land. Also, the Conservancy for the Range of the Condor was another group that helped us greatly. So we're immensely grateful to these other nonprofits who helped babysit us to help it. Because we're a non-federally recognized tribe, we were not able to get any assistance from the federal government, which is really heartbreaking since we're surrounded by 1 million acres of wilderness and forest in the Los Padres and the Ventana Wilderness area. So, like I say, we were on the road to get federal recognition, and our elders in 1996 told me that I must stop applying to the federal government, appeasing to the government to ask for federal recognition. They said, grandson, you do not waste time. Don't waste another ounce of energy on asking the federal government for recognition of us as a people, because we are a people. There are other tribes around us. We all recognize each other. We still remember the sacred story at the beginning of time when the 4 root races came together and were given the instruction by the Creator, Tera Turuk in our language. The Creator gave each color of the rainbow a teaching. And our teaching of the red people was to teach others about how to live as one with the earth. And that has been run over ever since the coming of colonization to our Turtle Island, our Mother Earth, from the east, from the Iroquois, all the way across to the Lakotas, Oglalas, the Sundance people, all the way through the plains and over here to the coast. We all have a specific teaching. Those teachings were missed because greed, because a thinking man that just was thinking all the time. I talk about a time when we were all once in a cave and they had the stick like this, and then we had the drums and, to pray and send our prayers out. He took the stick and he put the drum on one end, he got another stick on another wheel, and he figured out that this wheel would roll. He wheeled it out of the cave, and then he figured out how to take the 4-legged brothers of the bison and the animals to be able to pull this wheel. And it started a cycle, a vicious cycle, a terrible downturn. But this made mobility, and the sacred wheel, the sacred hoop, was broken for us. And they took off across the earth, from the east to the west, and basically exterminated most of us along the way, bringing us sickness and genocide. And it's very painful. We're still, as young ones, even a young youth, even a 2-year-old of my granddaughters, I see that pain. I can see the pain of it. But I also see the beauty of taking them out to their new lands and their ancient lands in a new way, that they are free to run on the land, free to roam. For the other youth to go on the mountain and pray and go through their rites of passage has moved me deeply. We acquired the land in June of last year, and we are now entering into our second cycle. We're coming out of the spring, so we're beginning to use the land in ceremonial ways. Our long-term plans are to construct a arbor and a roundhouse and our spot lodge ceremony and campground area where we can bring other elders to and bring other tribes and do intertribal gatherings and ceremonies. It's very important to us, and we're just so honored. And we want to help other tribes. We want to help other groups to be able to regain their lands. So we're here to help. We're here to answer any questions. We're here to give our assistance in any way we can to help other tribes. And it is a movement, and I'm so honored to hear the word LandBack. I've been hearing that for years and didn't really understand it, even though we know that the land belongs to us, sacredly belongs to us. It's our Aboriginal territories. Now the LandBack movement is really taking off. And since our tribe was able to be lucky enough to receive this land, it has spawned a lot of other land back movements in California and even outside of California. The Yurok people were able to get back 50,000 acres. The Kashaya Pomo people along the coast were able to get back, 1,500 to 2,000 acres. So, we're getting, we're seeing it's happening. It's starting to move. People are starting to give. And remember, people that have homes on Aboriginal lands, people, they want to give back. They have a feeling. We were recently bequested a home in town on the Monterey Peninsula. We've had so many people reaching out, giving us land. We're like, whoa, we want, how about helping the lonely people, help the other tribes, they need places too. So it's really been a powerful movement, and I see it moving forward. And I'm so honored to be here today with all of the other people that are, and all the audience. Thank you guys for listening to us, because this is so important. And getting Deborah Holland back as the Department of Interior is a big one for me and our people, because we really need a change overall in America. The tribes, even though they're called reservations, they're not truly the tribe's land. They are Aboriginal land, but the Department of Interior gives a trust back to a tribe. And this is one of the reasons why our tribe gave up on federal recognition, because we don't want the Bureau of Land Management to own our land, to manage it, to tell us, what we can do with the land and what we can't do. And my relatives to the south, the Chumash, the Santianez band, bought their own piece of property with their own money that they made on their own time as a sovereign nation. And when they bought this 1,700 acre, 1,400 acres of land, the federal government came in and said, thank you, we're taking this land away from you now. And they bought this land so they could expand their reservation. I don't like that word at all, but they were given to their land, and they fought it like crazy. Like, we bought this with our own money, in the American way. It's our land. But the government still took it, and they now are basically on a trust allotment. So I discourage anybody to go through the federal process to get land back. I think going the land trust route, going the route that is more along the lines of people giving it back, land back. That means give the land back to Indigenous peoples. They're the rightful stewards of the land. It belongs, And how are we going to end this progress? How are we going to end this destruction of Mother Earth with a paving over of every square inch? It hurt me so bad to hear Karina talk about 1/3 of an acre on 485,000 acres. It's just unfathomable to know something like that.
Yeah, it's very sad. Thank you so much, Tom. Really very good for us to hear everything that you and your nation is doing. We're very grateful. Thank you so much. Our next speaker is Joy Braun. Joy, or Eagle Feather Woman, is Cheyenne River Sioux. She was one of the first campers at Sacred Stone Camp, moved to Ocheti Shakoan Camp, and was at Black Hoop, or the Seven Generations Camp, during the eviction of the camps that sprung up to fight the Dakota Access Pipeline at the Standing Rock Sioux Reservation. Joy has long fought the Keystone XL pipeline, which resurrected its head at the same time DAPL was renewed, and continues to threaten her homelands. She is also making stands to protect the sacred Black Hills, her ancestral sacred lands, against fracking, uranium, and gold mining. Joy is a former editor with the Sitanka Vision and Lakota Voice. She's a frontline community organizer with the Indigenous Environmental Network. Thank you for joining us, Joy, and please share your inspiring leadership organizing to stop fossil fuels and how you see connections with Indigenous LandBack and rights of nature movements. Thank you.
Hamadakyapi, Chante Washte Nape Chiuza Happy Wambly, Wiakawi Imachiapi, and Pete Washte Happy. My name, like my friend Penny said, is Eagle Feather Woman. I'm a member of the Cheyenne River Sioux tribe. I'm Ohenupa band and Itazi Picho bands here of the Ocheti Shakoi, or the seven bands of the what the colonizers call Sioux, but we call ourselves Ocheti Shakoi. I'm really grateful to be here with Movement Rights, my Hunka mom, Lucy. It's really good to see her, and to see to have Tom and Crystal and Karina. I was very fortunate a couple years ago to be in Ohlone lands and went to the Shaw Mound sacred site And I was shocked when I realized that it was a parking lot. And then when I just recently saw the fence that went up, my immediate response was, I got to get over there and tear it down. I mean, that's my response, because as I'm like Penny said, I'm a community organizer, frontline community organizer with Indigenous Environmental Network, and IEN's role really is to provide assistance with Indigenous communities here across Turtle Island and elsewhere to help them build up their resources, their own personal power in fighting against either extractive industries, dams that need to come down, or for sacred sites. My mom, whose name is Sandra Fraser, and my uncles fought very hard for about 30 years to protect and build back some of our original ceremonies. Then one of the ceremonies is happening this Saturday, and it's over at what's called so-called Harney Peak in the Black Hills. It's the spring ceremony. And what's interesting about some of these places on these public lands is that we have to get permission from these United States government to go and pray on our own lands. And that's wrong. We should be able to go and pray and hold ceremony on our lands according to our traditions when the time is right. And I also remember, like we need to go to what we call Mato Tipila, are the civilizers, the white so-called civilization calls Devil's Tower, but we call it, in Lakota, we call it Mato Tipila. And I have to pay money to go in, except for a certain time period. If it's within this week, then I can go in. But if it's not within that week, then I have to pay money to go pray at one of my sacred sites. I shouldn't have to pay money. And no Indigenous person should have to pay money to go and pray at our sacred sites. So we need to take back ownership of that. And in fighting these extractive industries, I know one of the quotes that people heard me say is that we were up there at treaty camp at Standing Rock. And that's where my Honka mom and my brothers had gotten arrested, and my uncles had gotten arrested there. It had numbers put on their arms, like concentration camps, and thrown in dog cages. That's how they think about us as Indigenous people. They think of us as not even humans to throw us into dog cages, right? But I remember at treaty camp, I told them, if Dakota Access, you can come in and claim eminent domain for private gain, then we as Indigenous sovereign nations can go back and claim eminent domain for our gain on our own territories, on our own lands. And I stand on that, because we are sovereign nations and we need to claim that power back as Indigenous people, because we have a right to our lands. We have a right to bring back food sovereignty for our people, to bring back regenerative economies for our people, and to bring back those things that we know that will build true power and spiritual health for our people. Because when we have a connection with the land, when we are in that space, then healing begins. Healing can start to begin. We can have our ceremonies, and people will start putting down meth and alcohol and other addictions, sex addictions and other things. And we saw it happen at Ocheti. We saw on Standing Rock, the time that we were up there out fighting for Standing Rock, there were no youth suicides on Standing Rock. And people were giving up meth, and people were starting to learn how to pray. And our prayers, our spirituality is deeply tied to the land. The land is us, and we are of the land. And people forget that water and air are life. Without water, there is no life. And without air to breathe, there is no life. You know, the Earth Mother is crying. She's screaming. She's screaming. You're hurting me. You're killing me. And these people aren't listening. And it's up to us to stand up and say, enough is enough. And to draw that line and to say, we need to start building back our own communities. And that includes listening to the Indigenous people whose land you are on. Because as you've seen with Karina and our brother Tom, we never went away. You may not see us. You may not even recognize us in these urban civilized areas, but we have never gone away. Not all of us live on reservations. I do. I do choose to live on my reservation. I choose to live on my reservation, but I am also extraordinarily fortunate that my people do have a land base. But I count that as extremely fortunate because I'm also fortunate to be able to travel all over Turtle Island and meet other Indigenous sovereign tribal nations that don't have that. And it breaks my heart because colonizers right there knocking at the door and forcing these things on us. And we have the right to say, no, enough is enough. Enough is enough. And so I'm so happy that Karina and Tom are here because there's so much that can be learned from their stories and in helping other communities. I also have worked with another tribe, the Lummi Nation over in Virginia, and they had a big fight. And the Wampanoag, some of these tribes had treaties on the East Coast with the so-called Great Britain that the United States don't even recognize, and they had to fight for the just recognition. You know, and we don't have to say, like Tom said, we don't have to say, hey, federal government, recognize me. We've always been here. It's up to us to say we are who we are and to assert our inherent right for our people and for our people's best interest. And the other part of that, and one of the great things that happened at Ocheti and that has been carried out and carried forward is that there has been this coming together unlike any other time in history of all these tribal nations that came, not just here in so-called United States or so-called Canada, but also to our family in the global South that came up to Standing Rock. I remember Chief Ninaway that came up and some of our other Amazonian relatives that came up and some of our relatives from the so-called Central America that came up, and also New Zealand and Hawaii and Polynesia and Korea, because people forget that there's Indigenous people all over the world. There was even tribes that came from Africa. And there was a story of this tribal chief that came from Africa, but before we had even camped at Ocheti, he had a dream that they needed to come to this place. And they started raising funds and they came. This is all spirit-based. The spirits are moving us forward. And in order for us to survive, in order for the world to survive, it's time for the world to wake up and start listening to the Indigenous people. So, and that includes when we're asserting our rights against extractive industries. I know everybody thinks that we won Keystone XL. They're still building here in South Dakota. They're still building in Nebraska, and they're trying to build in Montana. And there was news that came out just on, I think early this morning or yesterday, saying that 21 states are trying to sue President Biden for Keystone XL. We will continue to stand and fight against KXL and other extractive industries. And if you haven't heard about Line 3 and Line 5, please go learn about it, because there's a huge fight brewing in Minnesota, and our relatives are going to jail right now. And that's their treaty territory, Anishinaabe treaty territory, and they're fighting for the rights of their water, their land, and their wild rice. And it's really important that we support them.
Great. Thank you so much, Joy. It's always such a pleasure to hear every word that you have to say. So our last speaker has already been introduced and shared some of her thoughts during the opening prayer. And Casey, would you please now share about the Rights of Nature movement, your work with movement rights, and why the Ponca chose to become the first tribe in the United States to recognize the rights of nature? And lastly, what's next for the Ponca and your role at the Global Alliance for the Rights of Nature? Thanks so much, Casey.
Thank you, Penny. I think we need to do this again. I'm going to tell you right now, I'm so inspired by what everyone is saying, what everyone is teaching me. Thank you. Thank you. I want to say it deeply to each one of you, my girl, Joy, Crystal, Tom, Karina, Penny, and Shannon. Of course, you know I love you. Just so amazing how I grew while you all spoke. My mind, my spirit, how touched I am with who you are as human beings and as children of our Mother Earth. I was reflecting while I'm listening to the AIM movement. And, you know, one time in 1968, I was living in the Bay Area on that Ohlone land, staying with my brothers and working as a waitress in Jack London Square. My big sis and my sister-in-law were teaching me how to make a few bucks and how to get money for college, which I never went to, by the way. But I want to tell you, Mika always says, I'm like my Uncle Leonard. I went to the University of the Universe. And that happened for me as well. But my brother Craig had just come back from Vietnam. And Alcatraz happened. And that was it. Our minds, our spirits were guided to this place where we all are right now. My Uncle Gus was kidnapped to Carlisle Indian School back in the early 1900s, my mother's brother. And at one point there, he gave a point of reference for when he ran away for about the 10th or 20th time. He said, I went back to the blanket. And that's what happened to us as a people back there. We had been relocated forcibly from Nebraska, South Dakota, after the Treaty of 1868, after the Ponca had ceded over 2.4 million acres in a series of 5 treaties. The US government wanted more from our relatives, the Lakota, Nakota, Dakota. And so they created this treaty called that Treaty of 1868, which they say mistakenly gave them, the Lakota, Nakota, Dakota people, the Poncas territory. And at that time, my grandfather was only a baby of about 5 years old, my mother's father. And he was forced to walk with my grandparents, my great-grandparents, my aunties, my uncles, my timis, negis, and walked those 680 miles. 1 in 3 died. 1 in 3 died after we got down here. One of my mother's aunties carried 4 i'e, I think lakota sa i'a, sacred stones from our fireplace up there so we could continue to exist as spiritual beings and be connected to our homelands. After that happened, and the as my relative Tom was talking about, this federal government put its will, put its knee on our neck. It's how we can make relatives with the Black Lives Movement, because we know that feeling. And they used the BIA, the Bureau of Indian Affairs, the BLM. They used the Army Corps. Because the Bureau of Indian Affairs was incepted under the War Department. All of these pieces that create where we are now need to be known. Our history needs to be honored. I think that it's time that people need to understand that none of these things are unreasonable that are being said out loud to you now. These are things that don't ask us questions about them. This is up to you to educate yourselves, and for all of the Indigenous people on this webinar, thank you. Thank you for being who you are and lending strength to this. For all of you non-Indigenous people, thank you. Because I think together we're reaching a turning point right here, right now, that all violence against our Mother the Earth is violence against the women and violence against the children, violence against our men folks who have had their natural ways bent and twisted, and they don't know which way to turn right now. I love to hear what Corina said about helping find our way back. And part of that for us was to create alliances that haven't been comfortable for us, like the Cowboy and Indian Alliance up there in Nebraska or Nebraska, where we allied with the ranchers and farmers who now are the caretakers of Ponca territory. And we made this alliance so that the earth herself could live and we could stop KXL. The sacred corn brought a dream to my eldest son, Mikasi, and he and these farmers who, by the way, ended up giving land back to the Poncas as they should. And hey, Ted Turner, are you listening? Yeah, I hear you own many millions of acres of Ponca territory. Just anybody who's his friend out there, tell him, call Casey. We've got an idea. Maybe land trust, maybe just LandBack, maybe it's revolution. I don't care. We're going to do this through ceremony. Today's a ceremony. Every day is a ceremony. Every breath, every drink, every little bitty bit of understanding that we get is a ceremonial time. And the ceremonial corn, the sacred corn of the Ponca people, went back into the earth after 117 years in Nebraska, because of a dream that was had. And when that happened, because it was sacred Ponca corn, the Department of Agriculture had to recognize it as such, and that became a sacred site. And KXL couldn't go through there and had to reroute, which was another tactic that we had to utilize. And that's something we could all use. And so here in Oklahoma, the Attorney General is joining into that lawsuit against Biden. But among the Ponca people, we already have our resolutions in place, and we have a treaty in place with 134 other tribes, our own treaty, not one made by them, one made by us, one signed by us, one ceremonied into being by us. wasn't a ceremony we were invited to with all living beings, I should put it that way. But our resolution is a form of what my daughter says, of exerting sovereignty, because we no longer can be as sovereign as they allow us. We can only be as sovereign as we're willing to take into our hands and be creative around. Those resolutions that we made while I was in office include putting a moratorium on fracking and injection wells in our territory, because we had 10,000 earthquakes, man-made earthquakes here because of fracking and injection wells, and millions of fresh waters that were forever taken. My mind keeps going back to Deb Holland and how she looked today when a woman of color was swearing her in. Wow. And here we are at this moment talking about all of these things. We have the moratorium. We have the resolution against KXL. We also adopted another statute that is called the rights of nature, because where we live, we're dying of cancers, autoimmune diseases. We're dying of all of the pollution where we can't even grow organic food or breathe clean air, where carbon trading is affecting the lives of our unborn that don't make it to birth, making it impossible for our babies to breathe, and they're hospitalized, where they know to look to their cousins, relatives, and friends and say, I forgot to bring my inhaler today. Do you have one I could borrow? That's how bad it is. Where people, our wisdom keepers, are dying, where economic development is impossible because the pollution is so bad where we are right now. So when Rights of Nature was introduced to me by Shannon at a time, and we were at a gathering of 100 women from around the globe with Osprey Oriole Lake, then she talked to me about this, and I did not like the concept because I thought it was like the Freedom of Religion Act. Why would they make a law about our religion if it wasn't good? Why? We know our religion. We know our ways. We know the ways that we're doing right now. We don't need somebody giving us a law. And I thought that way. But over the years, going to Ecuador, going into New Zealand, learning from others about how this law could be something that is part of our natural recognition of the natural laws that are already in existence that human beings have made different. You know, and one example I remember thinking is someone pointed out to me that a sacred tree that breathes breath for breath with us has no value to the colonizer until you cut it down. And then you can do something and sell something with it instead of understanding the intricate dance of all living things and how all things need everything else. And so that understanding helped me think, well, we've got to recognize the rights of the trees. We've got to recognize the right of the fins that live within the water. We have to recognize the right of the winds to blow. We have to recognize the right of all living things, because we're not here like protecting nature. We are nature protecting itself. And that's so important to internalize. So the rights of nature was a natural fit for that kind of understanding that has been with us for millenniums, but put it into the colonizers' understanding on a piece of paper and exercising the sovereignty that is already there by those living things. They know their sovereignty. During the time of COVID, when we all went inside and looked out our windows, the animals, the forelegs, they still behaved the same way. The fins behaved the same way. The winds blew how they need to do. Everything continued in its natural course. Only humans have defied the natural law. So the rights of nature were a natural step into that. And everything each speaker has talked about redefine that for me. Help me to see that what they're talking about is the same thing as I'm talking about. It's just that this is a formula, a tool that can be utilized. So Global Alliance for the Rights of Nature was also looking to create an indigenous understanding within the Global Alliance of the Rights of Nature, and asked me to participate in a manner that brings many indigenous peoples together to oversee our own territories, the lives of our ancestors and the generations to come in an honorable way. And I'm hoping all of you are going to be interested in that. How can this be part of what you're talking about? How can this be a frontline organizer's dream? How can this be Tom Littlebear's understanding of this sacred Big Sur area, and Crystal Tubal's LandBack dream, and Karina's Gold's Land Trust? How do these all fit together in some basket that we can enforce with one another as we move forward? I don't know, but I'm so excited that it's going to happen. I am part of this. I'm part of that seventh generation after the second coming of the white man. My children are, my grandchildren, my great-grandchildren, and so was my mother who taught me. And so as we move forward, I want to say thank you to the business committee of the Ponca Nation, the council. I want to say thank you to Brianna Arend with the Jason Amat's law firm. And I want to say thank you to Movement Rights, who's been part of the leading edge of this rights of nature movement. Because next week, we will be signing officially here in Ponca territory the recognition of the rights of the rivers that surround us. We will be recognizing through a formal resolution with a statute, creating law within our sovereign ability to do so, to recognize Nijide and Niska, the Arkansas and the Salt Fork River in white man's language. And by doing so, we will be ensuring her, the sacred one that we owe our lives to, her well-being and all of her children and all living things. And I wanted to share that with you in a moment of celebration today.
Wow, Casey, that's such exciting news. I know that Shannon and I were some of the first people to get to know that. It's so powerful and exciting, and so grateful that the Ponca Nation is leading the way with rights of nature. So we're supposed to end at 1:30, but there's still lots of people on, and we want to get to your questions and have our panelists answer. So I just want to make sure, can our panelists stay on for a bit longer? Just maybe do this if you can stay on for a bit longer, please. No, Crystal, oh, I'm so sorry. No, Joy, you can't. Oh, you can. Okay, and Karina, can you stay on for a little longer?
About 10 minutes.
Okay, so we'll try to gear our questions to those that need to leave first. Thank you so much. And Shannon is going to ask the most pertinent questions. She's been monitoring all those questions. Thank you so much, Shannon. And we're sorry, of course, we won't be able to answer all your questions, but just hearing from all of the speakers has been so powerful and educational for all of us. And so, Shannon, unless I have forgot something else, can you lead us in those questions?
Absolutely. And I just want to say again, thank you to all of our panelists. And I, knowing that some of you will have to jump off really quickly. So we'll just get to those questions. And I also just want to thank Casey for, we've never broken big news on a webinar before, so that is huge. Congratulations. And we're so proud to be a part of that work.
Shannon, before you go on, I'm so sorry, but I'm realizing that, especially with a couple of the panelists needing to leave, that I just want to let all of the Indigenous people that are here on the webinar, including the speakers, know that Movement Rights organizes intertribal rights of nature forums where we get together and where we learn more deeply about the rights of nature movement around the world with Indigenous people and what it takes, what it means, and how we can move that forward to protect and defend the sacred system of life. So if you're interested in that, please let us know. You can email Shannon at movementrights.org, and you will be invited to the next Indigenous forum on rights of nature. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
No, that's great. And I'm leaving this poll up for a second because we'll, by answering the poll, we'll be able to connect with you afterwards as well. So I'm just going to leave that up there for a second, also because talking and chewing gum at the same time is not my specialty. So in looking at some of the questions, Crystal and Karina, if you're still with us, some of them are we have a lot of questions from settler populations wanting to know what is the place of families of European descent in the LandBack movement. Others wanting to know how they can participate as non-Indigenous people. And then some of them, I think LandBack has some of the same, sets off some alarms for people like the defund the police, I think, in terms of what it means that people think they're going to be taking their land away. So some of those questions, can you speak to how to reassure progressive conservationists that returning public lands will improve rather than diminish protection and stewardship of habitats? So I'm going to focus those questions to Crystal and Karina first, because I know that they have to leave. Thank you. And you can just unmute yourselves.
Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna have to jump off, so I'll keep this really short. I was reading and reading some of the questions as we were going, so I wrote some notes down. But I think that for white allies and to become accomplices and not just allies, so I think making that transition, I think championing LandBack, and so the conversations around LandBack incite fear. But I think for white folks to do that work with your own relatives and within your circles of really dispelling that fear and helping to take it out of the conversation, and you doing the work of engaging in these conversations and pushing forward LandBack and challenging your own folks on that. And I think that would be really helpful. I mentioned earlier, just in terms of finding struggles and organizing fronts that are happening all around us, there's many ways for people to get engaged. And frankly, it's not my responsibility to point you in the right direction. I feel like you're fully capable of finding those ways of doing that. So I encourage you to keep doing that. I think beneficiaries, we have folks that are beneficiaries of land that's been handed down in your families, but were wrongfully taken. So I think look at, gifting those lands back to the respective nations around you. I think that's a huge step. There's land trusts and land organizing and fundraising efforts happening all across Turtle Island and beyond. Donate, fund those, find ways to leave funds for folks that are trying to reclaim lands and purchase lands. The other thing is landback.org. We're currently updating our website, but our website will be a place where we are able to list out as many LandBack struggles as we possibly can on an interactive map. And so, stay tuned for that. We're hoping to have that be a place like a one-stop shop for folks to know how to interact and engage with struggles happening. So that's coming. We'll have toolkits there around private, public, tribal, individual lands ownership. So, stay tuned for all of those toolkits. They're on their way. We'll have links and resources for how you can engage in the organizing that we're doing with Indian Collective. So those are the main areas I would suggest for white allies is to get involved. You do the work to do that. I have faith in that to happen. The other piece is there's examples all across this country of land conservation and relationships, right? And stewardship, a successful stewardship, right? So just looking at fire management, just recently with all the major fires, if we look to Indigenous people's knowledge on fire management, I guarantee that what we've seen this year would not have happened. And so look for those examples. They exist across every topic you could think of. You just have to dig for that. And there's articles, there's a lot of Native American Indigenous academics that have published articles across all of these topics. So I just encourage you to find those and research those, because there's examples of success everywhere. Yeah, just push those things out. So those would be the main pieces that I've tracked with some of the questions. I hope I got to as many of them as I can. But again, I have to jump off and jump to the next thing, but just really want to thank you and say what an honor it has been to be here today, and just really am excited for the continuation of this conversation. And when Casey said, let's do this again, you know, I'm in. So definitely always call on me. I'm always a resource and I'm always here to support. So please get a hold of me and let me know how I can continue to be a part of this and support. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Crystal. Thank you for joining us. Goodbye. Karina,
Crystal.
I know you have seconds left, but if you have any last thoughts on, on the issue, or another question that was posed to you specifically was, how did you document your sacred site? Was it through oral history? And that's another question that was posed specifically to you. So I will let you answer in the time that you have left, whatever you'd like to share. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. I just love being here today. Love hearing everybody's story. Love how we connect. Loved how to do this work. Okay, so whoever asked the question about being fearful about getting rid of police or giving land back, I want you to take a deep breath. And because we have lived under this system, for some of us for over 500 years, some of us for the last 250 years of police state violence and having our land taken from us. So we are asking people to not go through the same violence we went through, but to work with the Indigenous peoples on whose land you're on. And some people got land through the outright taking of land, or the outright killing of Indigenous people, or the enslavement of Native people. And so I always want to say, do your history on your own family. How did they get here? How did you get to the land that you're on? How did the generations of wealth help your family, and how did it take it away from the Indigenous people on whose land you're on? Then how do you come back and write relationships with those people? I think that's a great way for you to begin to do that kind of research on the real history of what has happened in this country. I think that also that there are groups of organizations that have been accomplices to many different groups in the, at least in the Bay Area. The Catalyst Project is one of those that actually does lengthy trainings and sessions and schools that you can go to, and you can find yourself. And I think they're having an event this weekend, and that you can check in. Surge, Standing Up for Racial Justice, is another white organization that does work around really educating white allies to become white accomplices and how to plug into doing the work. Stepping Back and Not Stepping Forward. I mean, if you look at the Bay Area, and this I'm calling from my own homeland, there were over 50 different creeks in my territory just in Oakland. None of them are basically daylighted. They're all horribly polluted. And just 200 years ago, you could drink fresh water out of each and every one of them. So how did you become and write relationships to those waterways again, now that you now live here? So there's a lot of different ways. Shumi in our territory is a gift tax that we ask people to pay. It's a way for you to come and write relationship. It's to create a relationship with the Segurite Land Trust. It's a way to do an honorary tax to help to pay for the work that we're doing, and to hopefully create a relationship beyond that. But it's a way for us to start to work together. So if you live, work, or play in our territory, we offer that as an opportunity to come and write relationship. We also have institutional Shumi that's created. And so those are ways of doing it. But really, if you live in California, there's lots of great books out that's about that. And when Indigenous people ask for you to stand up and come forward and help, then please use your bodies, your money, your time and resources to do that work that we're asking you to do. And those are ways to be, to come in into right relationships. And sorry, I have to go. Love you guys so much.
Thank you, Karina, so much. And yes, if you live on Ohlone territory, you can visit the Sogorea Land Trust website and learn more about Shumi tax. And you should join in. Shumi, as I understand, means gift, and tax. We all know what that is. So definitely consider making paying your tax, your Shumi, through the Sogorea Land Trust. Thank you so much, Karina.
Thank you, Karina. Love you. Thank you
Honor
so much
you.
for being with us. See you soon.
So as we're running out of time, I also want to put in a plug for the work that we do at Movement Rights, and all of the work. We've put up the donation sites to all of the organizations that have joined us here today. If this programming is important, if work like what Casey described, recognizing the rights of nature and Indigenous rights is important to you, we ask also that you make a donation to movementrights.org/donate. I'll put the link, of course, in the chat. But moving forward, there's a lot of work to be done, and we'd love to also be able to offer up a similar space like this again. So that's my little plug for donations, not just for Movement Rights, but for everybody. In terms of questions, one of the other questions about land and whether or not in Indigenous hands it would be better protected. And I just want to point out, and you can learn about this anywhere. There are lots of resources. Roxanne Dunbar Ortiz is a great resource and has put together some marvelous books for education on the history of Indigenous peoples in the U.S. and the world. But if you look at where the world's remaining biodiversity is, you will see that the map of those protected places matches up almost identically with the place where Indigenous sovereignty and Indigenous rights are strongest. So, 80% of the world's biodiversity is protected through Indigenous people protecting their lands. So that's just to add to that question. I want to open up some to the other panelists, Joy, Casey, and Tom. If you had any thoughts on the questions about either European settler populations and working with them, working with conservation and land trusts. Tom, I know you spoke quite a bit about that. And other questions were about, in order to recover the memory of land as reclaimed, are there efforts to rename places and give them their original names? And this question is open to any of the panelists.
The name, what we're going on with our land acquisition for our lands, we have already for the last 30 years been working with the federal government, Forest Service, USGS, U.S. Geological Service, to rename our sacred peaks, to rename our rivers, our spirit trails, our areas that we use, different names. And there is a big movement within the California that I know of to rename bring all the tribes together to renaming of the places. I know there's a website where you can type in your address and see what tribe, whose tribe's land you live on. And within that, I think our tribe, probably about 15 to 20 years ago, went through an ethnographical research of the Forest Service on our uses of the land. The fire, bringing back cultural burning has been something. We burnt our lands already since up until 1973, and we're stopped from doing that. And we've been revitalizing our traditional fire practices, our burning practices, our rituals that kept our country looking like a park, basically. And I want to say, I did see a question on my answer about why not federal recognition, which I thought I explained, but I want to re-explain that federal recognition, if the federal government wants to recognize us, why do we as Indigenous peoples that already know we're a tribe have to petition the federal government to get recognition? Shouldn't the federal government come to the tribe and say, we want to give you back your recognition? We recognize you as a tribe. What do we get from federal recognition? We get health care. We get a dog tag. We get health care. We get, what do we get? They're not really giving land away again. They already took the land. So for us, it was a futile event. We know tribes that spent $3 or $4 million trying to get federal recognition. Wouldn't that be much better to go for purchasing your own land? And we're already being taken care of through Indian Health Services from gaming tribes that have the money. And now today, I don't know if everybody knows this, they just approved a $91 billion money for Indian Health Services. Was this announced to me, or I had one of our elders call me before this call saying that they just approved $91 billion for Indian Health Services for Native Americans to be able to, I don't like wording that word, but that was the word that the federal government used for that. So, we really don't care about federal recognition. It doesn't do us anything. We're not looking for a reservation. We're not looking for anything along those lines. It has no meaning to us. It's a foreign word to us, federal recognition. I just wanted to stress whoever asked that question, but we're free from it. And we feel good about being free from the chains of the federal government, the pen, the school, the borders of a reservation. We're free of that. We're free to roam our territory. So I wanted to say that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Joy?
Well, the question about is there some kind of movement or something about reclaiming Native names? That's been going on for years and years, decades. That's been going on for a really long time, and it's one of the first places where the idea of reclaiming our right over the land started. So places like, what we call Mato Tipila and they call Devil's Tower, we're still fighting that. But there's other places like Squaw Valley. Why would you want a valley named Squaw? But it's more than just here in so-called United States. It's also in so-called Canada, even in so-called Mexico and other places. The idea of renaming places back to our original names is there. It's definitely there. And I would encourage you, wherever you happen to live, to look for those particular fights. I know, like up in Washington State, they're trying to rename the three major peaks back to the original names for either, like the Puyallup have for them or the Coast Salish people have for them. So it's happening all over. And like what you said, Shannon, there's 80% of the world's biodiversity is in and protected by Indigenous people. 80%. And so the idea that Indigenous people, that Native people cannot steward our own land is kind of ridiculous. That goes back to the idea of colonialization, that you have been taught by a colonial educational system that has been set up and designed to erase Indigenous people. And so really encourage you to look back at your history and realize that what you've been taught ain't true. What you've been taught is not true. Who else but us can have better steward of the land? We know the land. And if we don't know it, we have people, we have our ancestors, we have our elders, we have scientists, we have doctors, we have archaeologists, we have anthropologists, we have all kinds of people, geologists. We have all kinds of ologists in our own tribes or within other tribes that we can call on. We're not sitting around, not uneducated. We're very much educated people. My father was one of the first 10 Indigenous people to get his doctorate degree. My brother is an archaeologist. I'm one of the black sheep of the family. I went the other way and became a so-called environmentalist when all I'm really doing is just trying to protect our people. That's the route that I took.
Thank
It's
you.
not, yeah, go
Go
ahead. No, you go ahead.
No, you go ahead. Okay, Joy. No, you're not going to go ahead. Okay. So there are a number of questions about outside of Turtle Island, in Africa and other places relating to a lot of these same questions and renaming places. And Casey, I'm thinking maybe that's a question to talk a little bit about the Indigenous Council for the Global Alliance for the Rights of Nature, perhaps. And then the other question that is outstanding is, what advice would the panel give to other non-recognized tribes that are struggling to hold on to their land and encountering legal barriers to holding ceremony and constructing ceremonial buildings? Where to start? And that would have been I mean, a lot of people on this call could certainly answer that question, but certainly Karina and Crystal have additional thoughts on that. So I'll throw it to Casey. And Casey, you'll just talk about whatever you want to talk about, but those are the questions that we put out there.
All right, I remember one of them, so I'll start there. But first of all, I have to kind of tell Joy, Jeff was in here listening with me and saying we have ologists of all sorts. I really like that. I think I'm kind of an ologist. I haven't decided which one though. But at this moment, maybe I'll be a rights of nature ologist and then kind of answer a little bit, the idea that renaming everything is important because there was a sacredness with those names that came from our Mother the Earth telling us what that portion of Earth was named. We didn't just come up with it because we were exploring one day and we decided to claim that piece of land and give it our name because we're so keen, It was about prayer and understanding and ceremony that recognized the names of things. And part of that is what rights of nature for us is looking like. Recognizing the rights of the river was to recognize what the river called herself when we first arrived in this foreign territory. And so we're beginning to utilize within our own languages those territories' names that belonged to them and belonged to the language that we spoke. And hopefully this will be some of the trend that all people want to participate in. When the explorers came here to this sacred territory we called home and put their flag down and say, now like Mount McKinley in Alaska was renamed for an explorer, that can be erased, just like the racist statues are being erased from the deep south and other places. The names have to be re-recognized and reestablished. And rights of nature has that built into it if we build it into our recognition of what is nature calling itself, what is the earth calling herself in this portion. And as for our relatives and other portions of the global, I think that if you can help us through movement rights to bring some of the names forward, some of the tribes forward, some of the indigenous understandings forward into how you could like to collectively help form this Indigenous Council, it's invaluable. We want to start with maybe 15, 20 people on a gathering that will be part of helping to form what this council looks like. What is it going to go forward as? How do we define what our priorities are? And how do we define what the rights of nature are in your territory? Because of course, if I were in the Arctic Circle, it would look very different than if I was in the Amazon or in Africa or here in Oklahoma, in Ponca territory. It wouldn't be the same in Kiowa territory, in Ponca area. It wouldn't be the same for where my daughter Joy is or where our new relative Tom is. And so that's part of how this needs to grow. And we would really appreciate you maybe going on this journey and maybe leading this journey. We'll see how that evolves as well. Because a council is just like every other circle. We don't have a hierarchy. We have consensus. As far as I feel, maybe you'll have a different idea about that. But join us. And for me, it's through the Global Alliance of the Rights of Nature, or GARN, or reaching out through movement rights and finding the connection there. And then we still have to set our first date, first time we drink coffee together or tea and talk to the sacred water together and see how we go forward. And I don't know if you had other questions, but I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Casey. Penny?
Yes.
Hi.
Hi. I'm just so deeply moved by everything that everyone has talked about, but some of the comments in the chat were just incredible. And you know, I as we all know, we live in this critical time. We live in a time of prophecy, and we live in a time where I believe that we all chose to be here at this time to create this beautiful world that's just right there. I mean, it's just right there. We can feel it, we can imagine it, we can see it, and it's so much easier for the young people to see and imagine the world that they will be co-creating with each other. So very grateful to all of the speakers. And everyone had such wisdom to share, and I hope we can all gather in this space again. And just want to let you know that the video will be available within a couple of days on YouTube. You can watch it and share it from Movement Rights Facebook page a little bit after it's finished. And please, if you can, support Movement Rights, you know, financially. All this work that Shannon and I have done has been around a virtual kitchen table, just, you know, a couple of women with Casey's guidance and power moving us forward, and with the love and acceptance and support from all of our friends. And so I would just want to personally thank you all for being on this panel, and also thank all the viewers. It's an exciting time to be alive, and I think that is the thing that is so important for us to remember, that yes, there's a lot going on that may look, you know, like it's not part of a solution, but it's an exciting time to be alive because we get to be the heroes to all of the future ancestors that will come. So I'll hand it over to Shannon. And thank you, Shannon. You know, you do way more work than I do, and I love you so much. So thank you.
I want to just end with Casey Kampornik's words, which is very simple, and I think offers a reason for all of us to be here. So in addition to thanking all of the panelists today, we are so grateful to have you all here together. And again, we hope we can do this again same time next week. As Casey says, we are not humans protecting nature. We are nature protecting itself. And I think that's one of the things that is really unifying, regardless of where you come from, that, wherever you live is the place also to start. And we thank you very much, all of you, for being with us. And that's it. We look forward to being in touch with you. We'll send you all email follow-up. And thank you for being with us. Have a wonderful
Much
day.
love to all.
Bye-bye.